Welcome to the Produce Moms Podcast, where we believe there is a produce mom in all of us. I'm Lori Taylor, founder and CEO of the Produce Moms. For 10 years, I sold fresh produce to over 300 grocery stores in the U.S. And today, my team and I are fully focused on inspiring people to eat more fruits and vegetables. This show is just one of the ways that we hope to inspire you and your family to eat more produce and live a better life. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, join our community of almost 40,000 in all 50 states and over 30 countries by visiting theproducemoms.com/subscribe. And be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks for being here. Enjoy today's show. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is the Produce Moms Podcast, and my name is Lori Taylor. And hey, today we have the best guest. You are going to learn so much. I know that you're going to learn so much because this woman has taught me so much about chocolate and the trade and the labor practices, and all of her awareness and knowledge has led to her being the co-founder and CEO of Good Sam Foods. So you can check out their website at goodsamfoods.com. They are a self-proclaimed, and I can say that I am going to vet that right now on this show after doing more research on Good Sam. They are an absolute ally for small farms, and their mission is, they want to make food that is good for you, good for farmers, and good for the planet. So, hey, an episode that encompasses all of those things, that's right in line with what we stand for here at the Produce Moms. And I think most of you who listen to this show are aware that we have recently gone down the path of B Corp certification at the Produce Moms. And that's actually how I met Heather. She too, her company, Good Sam Foods, they too are on their path to B Corp certification. So with that, Heather, welcome to the show. We are so glad you're here.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This is so fun.
Oh, you're the best. And should we let our listeners in on our little secret? I think we might go ahead and just be honest. This is actually the second time that Heather and I have connected for a podcast. It happens very rarely, but in the world of technology,
yes.
Glitches and errors and audio distortion, it's a real thing. And that is what sabotaged our first episode. And now here we are re-recording that episode with Heather. It's great to have her on. She deserves a real round of applause because she's giving us double the amount of time essentially for this recording, but it's great to have you on, Heather. Thank you for being here. And gosh, it is time to just dive in. You truly have taught me so much. When I listened to the episode, when we recorded that original episode, I had no idea that there was this kind of that there was a need for this level of education in the chocolate industry specifically. But I look forward to you telling that story. That's not my story to tell, but I do think it's important that our listeners today know you are going to learn a lot. It's going to open your eyes. It's going to pull at your heartstrings. There's some tough facts that Heather's going to drop on you, but they're important facts. You know, the only way that we can really make progress is if we understand the facts and the current state. So with that, Heather, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about Good Sam Foods and how you came to be the co-founder of this great brand.
Well, Lori, like I said, thanks for having me. And it's a real pleasure to be here again. And, I've been in the natural consumer goods industry for over a decade. I started my first company in 2009 called Nibmor Chocolate that's still on the market today. You can find it sometimes at Costco, sometimes at Walmart, all over independent retailers all over the United States. So I developed that brand. I started that brand with my co-founder, Jennifer Love. And we ran that brand for about 7 years. We sold it to our investment partners. And then I moved on. I had a bakery for a while, decided I didn't want to do that backbreaking work for the rest of my life. It was very hard. But I had always had in my mind that was maybe something I wanted to do. So I was really glad I went on and had that experience. And then I became the VP of sales for a brand called SW Basics. That's a cult beauty brand out there. And that was really fun too. And I became a consultant after leaving that gig. I was working with lots of different retailers at that time, everybody from all the independent mom and pops all the way up through the ranks of Walmart, Costco, Whole Foods, you name it. I was working with them in that company. It was a lot of fun. And what I really wanted to do after that was I wanted to help other women in business in particular. I wanted to help them write their business plans. I wanted to help them raise capital. I wanted to give back a little bit of what had been given to me over all those years of what I sort of call the school of hard knocks, right? The business angle of it. And of course, the navigating through the food and the beauty system for so many years. And I wanted to make that easier. I ended up at Good Sam because I was consulting at a group in New York City called Beyond Brands. And Sam Stroot, my co-founder, walked through the door and he had really deep roots in supply chain. And one of the things that had bothered myself and Jen at Nibmor was the lack of transparency in the supply chain. And back when Jen and I started Nibmor, there wasn't a real opportunity for two female founders who were green, right, to travel in the field and really understand what was going on in the food system. In the times that we were afforded that opportunity, we went out a few times and we got to talk to some farmers, that our third-party middlemen allowed us to talk to. And, they were really curating that experience. But in the offshoot moments that we had with some of those groups and those farmers, there was a lot of talk around, the fair trade system doesn't work for us. We're not really getting the money that we need. When these fair trade projects get laid down on us, they're with strings attached. It has to be this or it has to be this, and it's not really what we need. And at that time, I couldn't do anything about that. I couldn't make anything change in the system fundamentally.
And
I didn't know how.
From a timeline point of view, Heather, approximately what year is this?
About 2010, 2011.
Okay. So we're at a fraction of the consumer awareness that we have today.
Oh, yeah. And so I think for Jen and I, it always aided us, but we didn't really know how to change it. We didn't know what could be done. Right. And the space was still pretty new in the US and developing. Places like the EU are just so light years ahead of us in terms of sustainability and human capital and all of that. And we just were a little bit stuck. And when Sam walked in and had these direct relationships and had this access and really was navigating the system well, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is the opportunity. This is the opportunity for real change. This is the opportunity to really flip something on its head. And so we took all the middlemen out of our supply chain at Good Sam. We just stripped it. And middlemen in food and agriculture, and even in beauty to a certain degree, are prevalent, right? And so most small brands that you see in the natural products industry, when you see that big price tag on them, it's because they're going through a lot of different layers of people to get their product produced. So we stripped all that out and we decided to go to the source and negotiate with the farmers on our own and build alliances within different countries in order to get the product to market. So, all my experience in all the other companies led to this moment of really understanding, I think, the US consumer, knowing that I have to get to the US consumer with the good for you, right? This is why it's good for you. This is what we're doing for you. This is what's going to help you get to your goals. This is what's going to help you, feel good every day. Good for farmers, really eliminating that human capital piece, saying, hey, we should all be treated equally. And anything that you buy in the grocery store, you should feel good about the person who's planting the seed and that they are being granted a living wage. They are able to take care of their families. Their fundamental needs are being met and then some. And good for the planet, because I know there's probably been a lot of people now are hearing the words regenerative agriculture. In fact, I was watching like a chick dramedy on Netflix, and like one of the characters is like a regenerative farmer, which I thought I was just like, oh my God,
that is funny. Yeah.
And I was so excited, Lori.
Yeah.
And then, so regenerative agriculture is arguably one of the fastest ways to combat climate change. It's about stewarding soil, taking care of soil, and really, farming for the future. Yeah. So we only work with farmers that are in regenerative systems or building regenerative systems. So that is a part of the company's ethos as well.
So good. And, as you were talking about the the middleman presence in the food supply chain. It was reminiscent to me of an episode in our archives, folks, episode 106, all about the farming economy, providing you with all these insights of the, really the critical need for the farming economy to undergo some radical change so that the producers themselves, the farmers themselves, are financially incentivized and rewarded for doing things like adopting regenerative farming practices and transparency and all of these things that Heather, in my opinion, Heather, I feel like you've built your business around those values.
Yeah, we really have. And I think, everything for us is about that circularity, right? It is about the consumer, but it's also about the sower of the seed. It's also about the planet. We argue one of our internal phrases that now is starting to bubble up more and more outside of the inner walls of the company is planet, people, prosperity for all. We put planet first because without the planet, I don't care what Jeff Bezos says or Elon Musk about going to Mars, like it ain't happening in our lifetime. It's probably not happening in our children's lifetime. Right. If we don't take care of where we are right now and here, there won't be anything left. These intense weather events, all of it, they're just going to keep happening. I think what's really interesting about, especially the American narrative, is that I think when it comes to climate change, we do feel rather invincible about it. We feel like it could not happen here. It's not possible for it to happen here. Don't we have some way of protecting ourselves from something this awful happening here? But it's happening. And none of us are really safe from it. No amount of government money or resources can change Mother Nature's path.
Right. And I'm yet to meet a farmer who disagrees with that. So definitely agree with you. So folks, please, episode 106, Robin O'Brien, she's stellar. She was a former guest in the archives. There's an entire episode that goes into this topic that we're talking about right now. But Heather, I want to stay focused on your story, focused on your brand. How did you know there was a need? I mean, you mentioned that you were in the chocolate business before, the opportunity for Good Sam Foods presented itself, but how did you really know that there was a need to build a chocolate business around these values and brand, I should say?
Yeah, I think, when we built Nibmor, it was really about, it was the first time in my life where I would be, Whole Foods was really on the rise. It was expanding very quickly at that time. It was in the mainstream consumer narrative, and people were flipping over their food and looking at the ingredients for the first time, maybe ever, and starting to question what was on that label. And so Jen and I really wanted to kind of tap that nerve and say, okay, well, what if you turned over a chocolate bar and you could understand everything, and it was organic, and it was this new thing called non-GMO verification? Because, we forget it's now very much in the mainstream narrative, but non-GMO projects started in 2010. Right. And we were the first non-GMO project verified chocolate bar on the market. So we bought into that concept and this idea that, we should not scientifically alter food. We should really lean on more ancient practices, more indigenous practices. I don't think Jen and I knew that at the time, but we knew that scientifically altering food was not something that we were for, right? That there had to be a better way. Yeah. And, gluten-free, vegan, we hit every point. And I think we were one of the first brands who did that we really went long. And we did that because consumer mindset was really changing. And consumers went along with us, right? They wanted to see that food companies were starting to crack open, pull back the curtain a little bit and see all of the warts and all, right? That we could open it up a certain amount. I think at that point, we were opening it up more than most, right? And so we were successful in that way. And I think that that's part of the reason the brand still exists today, is that there's a trust between consumers and that brand. When Good Sam came along, it was not a chocolate brand, and it's still not technically a chocolate brand. Chocolate is one of the verticals within Good Sam, but we also do nuts. We do coffee. We have baking mixes. We have oils coming out, different types of food products that all are regeneratively farmed together. I think what I was really looking for was true circularity. And when Sam presented it, I thought, man, we have a real opportunity here. Like we have a real opportunity to introduce true circularity, not greenwashed circularity, not any of it.
So what's that mean, Heather? I mean, true circularity. What do you mean by that?
So circular systems are ones that take care of themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I think of it from the perspective of, so if I think of the product, right? If I think of the life cycle of the product, sure. When a consumer buys a Good Sam chocolate bar, right? For instance, so let's just use the chocolate bar as an example. The only people who have touched that chocolate bar are the transportation company that brought it to the United States, the co-manufacturer in Colombia that has produced that product, another truck company that has brought the beans in from the point of collection from the farm, mm-hmm. and the farmers. That's it. Right. So it's a very transparent system, and one that takes care of every player who mm-hmm. is involved in its movement, right? So by paying the farmers directly and giving them a higher price for their products, they are able to invest more in their communities, right? On top of that, Good Sam also has a direct trade program. The 1% that we would have paid those fair trade groups, because by the way, anything that's labeled fair trade in the United States, really anywhere in the world, this is a generalized system, a generalized comment on the fair trade system, but roughly in every fair trade certification, 1% of the brand's top line sales is given to that certifier to do with it what they will. Give to the farmers, give, pay their bills, pay for their offices, pay for their travel, right? All of that. So the idea behind our direct trade program is like, well, why? We're big enough and we're moving enough product that we want to just directly invest in those communities. So we take that money and we give it to our communities. Not so much giving it to them, but we give it alongside them, right? So we're actively managing projects within those communities that are helping to grow the community. The community sits down with us. We say, what are the issues right now? What do you want to do with this money? They offer up some insights. We offer up some insights, and our team helps them create that project. We use as much local resource as we can before we go out to larger cities, et cetera. But we're really taking care of that ecosystem, and we're helping that ecosystem grow. Ecosystem, families, farms, community, everything. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side, obviously our co-manufacturers are taken care of. They're very happy. Everybody's, driving volume and making their numbers. And then as we move the product into the United States, we're giving the consumer what they want, what they need. And every time somebody picks up a Good Sam product, they can know that the people who are farming it on the other end are taken care of. This is a fair product. This is truly taking care of the planet, taking care of people, taking care of you and your needs as well, right? So when we think of a circular system, we think of one that is constantly giving back to itself, right? And that's really what we've created here. And that's, really the definition of regenerative agriculture is true circularity as well, right? You take care of the soil provides a healthy crop, the crop is sold, the money comes back to the community. There's a reinvestment in the community and a reinvestment in the soil and the stewardship of the soil, which in turn neutralizes and sequesters carbon and nitrogen and helps us to have less greenhouse gas, right? Less carbon in the atmosphere. So that's how we have many pieces of circularity within Good Sam, but that's how we think of it from a supply chain perspective.
Yeah, it's you just described it in a fantastic way. So is direct trade like the catalyst or the engine that fuels it all? Is that your point of differentiation?
I think it's many things. I think sometimes people can think that things like fair trade, direct trade are philanthropic, and that's not how we see it, right? Okay. So philanthropy is one thing, and something like the work that we're doing, or even some of the work that fair trade groups are doing is not philanthropy. The idea behind fair trade and direct trade is to grow communities. And so oftentimes people will say to me, oh, wow, you're such a good person, Heather. And I'm like, maybe, I don't know. I like to think of myself as a good person, Lori, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to grow my business, which means I have to grow their business. And that means I have to take care of them, right? I have to make sure that they can meet their basic needs, that their children can meet their basic needs, that they can remain healthy, and that they can continue to grow this community and grow their crop. Otherwise, I'm dead in the water, right? So I like to think of myself as a good person, but I'm also a business person, right? And really, circularity and sustainability and taking care of people and taking care of planet is a business decision. It is not all, hearts and stars and holding hands. It is actually a business decision, and one that I would argue large corporations are really missing out on, because when you deplete the system, right? When you really deplete the system, you will lose workers, you will lose quality, you will lose quantity, right? I was just listening to a New York Times podcast on the rancher industry in the United States and the monopoly on beef in the US, right? And how ranchers are now, they're just bleeding cash, right? They're just bleeding money because the four main processors in the United States have pushed them so far down. That is not a sustainable system. And the end consumer really pays for it, right? Because if there's less ranchers, less beef production, prices will continue to go up, right? Which is going to hit the pocketbook of the consumer. But the one person who never, ever, ever suffers is the middleman, right? So always remember that, we have to demand more of the food system. We have to demand more of the companies we purchase from, because if they're not taking care of their workers in their factories and their farmers in the field, they're not taking care of us as consumers at all.
Right. And so again, as you're talking, I'm like, and this is the foundation of Good Sam Foods, but let's get into those sustainability pillars, the brand values, that knowledge that you have on this industry, and really talk about what what you and I were talking about pre-show. I mean, this knowledge that you have on the chocolate industry at large and the whole supply chain, Heather, I mean, it's changed everything since I've met you. It's changed my whole mindset around one product line that I have in my house at all times. So please share some more with our listeners right now. I mean, and I will preface it by saying this is hard to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, chocolate is a difficult crop, and, I've been in chocolate since the beginning of my career in natural products. And I think, again, I've always brought out products in the fair trade system and making sure that at least something's happening, right? Or I think something's happening. Certainly in the early days, we didn't know, and we didn't understand, when Jen and I started Nibmor, we did not understand the complexity of the situation for workers and children and women at all. We knew there were injustices in farming and agriculture, but I don't think her and I could have ever imagined that we would open cans of worms that we did. And I certainly could have never imagined that over the course of my career that I would continue to see it happen. So, look, cheap chocolate exists for a reason. Chocolate is a commoditized crop. It is a very highly sought after crop all over the world, everywhere from Europe to the United States to Asia. It is a top mover and shaker in every grocery retailer on the planet, right? Yeah. So we're always looking for value on those items that we are purchasing in store. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to villainize that. I know that is, for some of us, looking for that yellow tag, looking for that sale, looking for that value brand is really important because of economics. And I would argue, and that's a much bigger topic, Lori, that this is all interconnected when it comes to workers and fair living wages and people being able to make a living wage, and that there are people in this country who can't afford to be able to make choices that are not on the backs of other people. I think that is deeply, deeply unfair, but I digress. Yeah. That's another podcast for us, Lori.
Well, we'll bring you back on because it's another good topic, Heather. Right. But yes. Yeah.
But cheap chocolate, right? And I always say this, and this is a little jarring. And again, it's going to feel jarring when I say this, but if you, and on Halloween, when your kid comes back home, right, you're 6, 7, 8-year-old, comes home and they dumped out all the candy on the floor and they had all this chocolate, all these shiny wrappers. And if you told them in that moment that all of that candy that was sitting there came into existence and was able to be in their hands because children were forced to work in unfathomable situations that none of us here in the Western world would ever accept for our children. In fact, would be horrified by children being trafficked, children being forced to work, children being abused in ways that seem medieval to us, right? In order to produce that candy, how do you think your child would react to that? And I'm often met with really puzzled, quizzical looks because that is what's happening in places like West Africa, in particular, the Ivory Coast and Ghana, where most of the chocolate that comes into the United States is from. The bottom line is that there are many, many dark sides of the food system. The chocolate industry in particular has suffered from this for many, many years. And about 20 years ago, all of the main players within the sector, every name brand that you can think of that's on a conventional grocery store shelf, promised that in 20 to 25 years' time, they would eradicate this situation. And they
with
haven't.
Child labor. Correct.
With child labor. Yes.
Yeah, I read
child
the
trafficking
studies.
and child labor.
Yeah.
And it hasn't happened.
Right.
And in fact, not much has changed.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about with this tears at your heart. So yeah. I mean, you can read the studies, you can do the research yourself. Because I was blown away almost to a defiant level when Heather was telling me this in our first recording. But I did my own research after closing out the conversation with her. And I was disheartened, like, to say the least. That was like, it was disheartening, disgusting, like brokenhearted, all of those emotions where you're like, wow, I had no idea that this was real, and it is real. And how are we not making a bigger change? So Heather, please carry on. But I just wanted to share my raw sentiments on that because this point of the dialogue right here is what, this is where my heart kind of sunk, but also where I really tuned in to everything Heather was saying, like, oh my gosh, this is a real problem.
Yeah. And so again, even though, like, I think for us at Good Sam, we are not working within fair trade systems, there are smaller brands out there that are working in fair trade systems. And I'm not demonizing fair trade. Fair trade has many redeeming qualities, right? When you pick up something that has a fair trade label on it, you know that a company is really trying to do its best to get that transparency. It doesn't mean they're always getting it. I want to preface that. That's my problem with those organizations and my problem with the system at large. But it's better to buy into that than to buy into nothing, right? And, it's interesting with some of the larger players because in places like the EU and the UK, they label for fair trade because the consumer base simply will not allow and will not purchase something that is on the backs of children, women, families, the whole nine yards, right? So that system has changed over time in places like that. In the US, it's been one of the largest kept secrets that, that cheap chocolate bar, that whatever, right? That cheap chocolate that you buy off the shelf is a product of slave labor. And I really mean that in the sincerest form. I'm not being overtly dramatic. Child slave labor in particular. So, I think we should all be questioning our food. We should all be questioning the companies that produce our food. We should all be a part of this conversation because we're part of we're all human. We're all at the end of the day. It doesn't matter where on this planet you are from, what color your skin is, what nationality, what culture. We are human together. And the planet and the people, if we don't fundamentally take care of those two things, we're leading toward collapse, right? And so how can you make a difference in your everyday choices? Because that conversation can seem overwhelming to most people. So then the question becomes, well, what can I do on an everyday level that makes me feel good? That, maybe in some instances, like maybe if you don't have a ton of money to spend on something like this, if you can't shop at Whole Foods, like I get it. Some people just aren't in the economic place to do that. But there are ways to do it, right? There are ways to do it. And there are things that you can say no to in the conventional grocery store. And there are brands that are affordable enough in those places that you can say yes to and make a real difference. Because remember that when you purchase something anywhere, grocery store, online, wherever, you are sending a signal to the company, whoever the aggregator is, whether it be a grocery store or a grocery platform like an Amazon or a Thrive Market or whatever. You're sending a signal first to them to say, I accept this.
Yeah.
I'm willing to purchase
this. Earn my money. Yeah.
And then in turn, you're sending a signal to the company to keep making it because you have accepted it. So if you reject it fundamentally and you reject it enough times, change will happen. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I think we underestimate that power as consumers. Like we all really have a powerful voice in this. All of us, every single person listening to this podcast right now, I'm telling you, you are actually one of the most powerful voices in the room. You have the power to influence decision by people who make food.
Yep. I believe strongly that the most powerful person in the food supply chain is the end consumer.
100%.
Yeah. So take it to heart. I mean, you can be a catalyst for change. It starts very grassroots. You can be a catalyst for change and what earns your money. And then from there, you can be a catalyst for change with things like requesting change from your grocery retailer, educating them, pushing back on them for their, transparency with the products they're putting on shelf. It's all important. And most importantly, it's all really coming. I mean, Heather and, through her business journey that she shared with us, your passion and awareness for transparency in food began long before it was a more mainstream, topic and consumer demand. There weren't necessarily cries or calls for sustainability in 2010 at the level that we are experiencing today. And, 2022. So it's absolutely the future of food I think it's all of these things. It's sustainability, it's fair, it's, equitable food systems and economies. So it's, I don't know, Heather, share anything you want here. I feel like I'm just, I hear it again out of your mouth and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I didn't know, I didn't know.
But there's hope, but it's okay that you didn't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. And, it's so funny. I've been reading a lot about like synchro destiny and all of this recently and spirituality. And like, you can't blame yourself for not knowing something until it comes into your conscience, right? Now it's in your conscience. So it's like, what are you going to do about it? Again, the customer service desk at your grocery retailer exists for a reason, right? And it's not just for returns. You can go up to the customer service desk every time you're in the grocery store and say, hey, just wanted to check in, wanted to see, I see you guys don't have a whole lot of fair trade certified or direct trade chocolate. Like I'm really interested in that. And I'd like to know why. And I'd like to know if you guys have any plans to bring them in as a consumer. You do that enough times, you get enough people to care about it. You get enough people to talk about it to that customer service desk. It's going to change, right? It's going to get, because the person behind that desk is going to be like, oh my God, I gotta go tell somebody about this. Like everybody's coming to this desk asking me this question. You would be surprised how much influence you have there. So the first thing is, don't feel overwhelmed. Don't feel guilty for not knowing. It has been held behind closed doors by very good PR people and a lot of money, right? Which a lot of things are in this country. It's sort of like the good thing and the bad thing about democracy and being able to freely move about is that sometimes this type of information can be hidden from us because money can really shroud it, right? So know that it's not your fault that you haven't heard about this. But now by listening, now So now you can say to yourself, well, what am I going to do? Can I buy another option? Can I go to that customer service desk? Can I, buy another option and maybe give it to my friends and see if anybody asks me about it and pass this podcast along or pass other information along that's reputable, right? Where people have been in the field or it's a good news source or whatever, right? I think if you can do that and you can do it with integrity and without bullying and without righteousness or judgment, that is how we create change in the system, is by saying like, hey, maybe you didn't know, but now, so we can band together and we can take this on and make some real change here, right? For the world. And it seems like it's something that we can't do. Like, how could I possibly, I've got 2-3 kids, I'm running around all the time, I have a job, but that one purchase can really matter. Switching from the one brand to another can really matter, right? And there's some great brands out there. Of course, I have my own brand, and we have our own value proposition with things like allulose and no sugar added. But there are plenty of brands out there that are amazing, brands that have been my peers and people who I've learned from and who've been champions in this industry, who I encourage you to go taste the rainbow of, every chocolatier out there, especially in this vertical. There's so many great people out there doing amazing work. Right. So just figure out what you're going to do about it. Maybe next year you say to yourself, like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll give out stickers on Halloween, right? Or something like that. Again, that is change. That is something. It's not nothing. It creates a ripple effect that may get another person saying like, oh, maybe I should do that next year. Maybe I don't want to buy this crap like anymore. Maybe I want to go do something healthier or different or something the kids will appreciate more or whatever. Right. That's real change. That's real change. And it seems so basic, but it is so huge at the end of the day.
Yes, indeed. So let's talk specifically about your product lines and, what's in them, what's not in them, the array of products that you offer today, any products that you want to talk about that are in the pipeline. I know you're constantly innovating and adding to your portfolio. So tell us a little bit more about Good Sam Foods. And again, folks, goodsamfoods.com. You can check it all out for yourself. But Heather, please.
Yeah. So I wasn't going to go the sugar-free route. Thrive Market is a partner of ours. If you don't know Thrive Market, they're amazing and certainly a really cool place to buy natural products at a deep, deep discount because they do business directly with brands. So it lowers the price point to the end consumer significantly. And I'm a huge fan of them. But Thrive pushed us really hard to develop a new sugar-free offering, which we did. And so we use a sweetener called allulose. Look, we can't escape the fact that 42.2% of all American adults are now considered clinically obese. That is a true fact and number that came out in 2020 before the pandemic. We want to talk about pandemics. This is endemic. This is something that we are struggling with massively as a country, and it's not going in the right direction. Right. So formulating with something like allulose was really interesting for me in that vein. People are really looking for low sugar, no sugar alternatives. Allulose is interesting in that it is 70% as sweet as sugar. It tastes a lot like sugar. It doesn't have as much of a cooling effect as something like a stevia or a monk fruit, because things like stevia and monk fruit are like 200 to 400 times sweeter than sugar, right? So they're cloying. They are very aggressive, right? So for a lot of people, they're like, ugh, I really don't like that. Too sweet, too much.
Yeah, you notice them. Yeah.
You notice them. So allulose doesn't have that. And so that was why we chose that sweetener. Allulose also has some really interesting studies around it right now. A lot of clinical nutritionists are getting behind it. If you're really interested in allulose, I encourage you to go over to our website, goodsamfoods.com, and look at our blog. Clinical nutritionist Ashley Koff wrote a really amazing article for us about allulose and its benefits alongside her team. So it's a very comprehensive article, and I definitely encourage you all to go over there and take a look at it. So we've done chocolate bars, chocolate candy coated items that mimic things like M&Ms. We have macadamia nuts, which is actually one of our biggest sellers, interestingly enough. Coffee, baking mixes, chocolate chips, right? So there's something for everybody. It's a very, very wide portfolio. We don't think of ourselves as a chocolate company or a coffee company. We're a food company. So our coffee and our cacao for our chocolate grows together. Our macadamia nuts and some avocado oil that we're sourcing later this year grow together, right? So all of these items have a story behind them, and they're all circular. They're all, not only do we offer the farmers that direct trade program, but we're also buying multiple crops from them, right? So there's a lot of intention behind every product that we make at Good Sam. And so, I totally encourage you all to go over there and check it out. We always have like a deal running. We always have, bundles and really fun ways to try the product. So I definitely encourage everybody to go over there and check it out.
Oh, Heather, that was so good. Thank you. And, we would be remiss to not mention the agricultural process of chocolate. With this being the Produce Moms podcast and farming being top of mind for us always, can you walk folks through like what does chocolate even come from? Like people really don't know. Yeah. And for most people, the regions where chocolate is grown are it's not in most domestic regions here in the United States. I mean, there's a reason why this is an imported product due to climate and whatnot. So please, anything that you'd like to share with the agricultural process.
Yeah. So cacao only grows within 15 degrees, either north or south of the equator, which is why we can't grow it in the United States. Because people always ask me, they're like, why don't you just start a cacao farm in the United States? And I'm like, right. Yeah, it's not that easy. Like it grows in a tropical climate, right? So in
really, Hawaii, I think they have some in Hawaii, correct?
Some, yes. It's not known for it, and it certainly doesn't grow. It's a challenge to grow it there, right? So, though there's some beautiful Hawaiian cacao, certainly, but it's more limited. Sure. So, in general, though, it grows within 15 degrees of the equator, north and south. It is a very heat-centric crop, which is why now another very sad element of climate change is that we see coffee really creeping up the mountainside, cacao really encroaching on coffee farmers, especially in places like Colombia. Mm-hmm. The coffee is becoming more and more inaccessible. And that's going to drive coffee prices up in the next couple of years. So you heard it here first. Your cup of coffee at Starbucks is going to go up. Your coffee at the grocery store going to go up. Even the remnant brands, like the ground up,
like Folgers and stuff like that. Yeah,
gonna go up. It's all going to go up in the next couple of years because climate change is really affecting coffee crops at a level that is unprecedented. Wow. So be aware. And chocolate, is a very resilient crop, though we do see problems in cacao as well. But chocolate grows on trees, literally, and it grows in a very big, hardy pod. And if you want to see pictures of it, go to my Instagram, Heather K. Terry. I am often musing on the way that chocolate grows, and I have lots of videos there also on TikTok as well. And Good Sam has a bunch of that interspersed alongside many, many other things on our company Instagram as well. But it's a pod. It's a very, very hard pod. It has to be opened with a machete. It's opened by hand. Inside are seeds that are covered in a fleshy white fruit. And that white fruit is what the beans that are inside that fruit ferment in order to make chocolate. And it's a much longer, more intricate process than that. I'm definitely oversimplifying it, but it is truly miraculous to see it go from these beautiful orange, yellow, green, brown pods into a chocolate bar. It's just usually not what people really expect it to be. So yeah, definitely go over and check that out because you can see a lot of our travels. You can see a lot of me opening pods, tasting pods. It's really fun. But cacao is a really interesting fruit and plant and go over to Instagram, everybody. You can ask me a million questions. I am happy to answer all of them. But that's the general 411 on how chocolate is grown.
Yeah. Thank you. And hey, a big takeaway there. It's a fruit, right? So
it's a fruit. Mm-hmm. It is a fruit. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a fruit.
Yes. Gotta love that. That's a great justification for your indulgence. And hey, now you'll indulge with a little bit more consumer intel and awareness of the supply chain too. So goodness, Heather, it was wonderful to welcome you back. Your knowledge is really important.
Thank you.
I want to encourage everyone, do your own research here, use this as a springboard for your consumer curiosity. It's people like us that really can change the food system. We can make the world a better place with our consumer demands. And Heather, I'm so thankful for what you have taught me because it really it's changed my behavior in my home. And it means a lot to, the more you learn, that's all you can, that's what it's all about, right? Like just educate me on things I don't quite understand. And you have done that in a very big way for me and my family. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Lori. I really thank you for having me again. And I am such a big fan, and thank you for all that you do to bring these topics into the narrative for people. This is really important to be able to talk about these things.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I agree. And I want to remind everyone before I give the mic back to Heather for her final goodbye and closing remarks, any last words, but goodsamfoods.com. You can go there, check out this entire wonderful brand. They've got some amazing videos where you can actually go to the farms in Kenya and Colombia. And of course, you can poke around their shop and check out all their wonderful product lines. Get some of those top selling macadamia nuts or one of the delicious chocolate bars. The mint chocolate bar is a household favorite here, but they're all good. So Heather, thank you again for your time. And please, any final words that you'd like to share with folks?
I just, again, go out there and create change in whatever way you can. Nothing is too small. Nothing.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Produce Moms podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a featured guest, just send an email to Lori@theproducemoms.com. We know there is a produce mom in you because there's a produce mom in all of us. Join our community on Facebook and all social platforms. Help us change the way America eats. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.